Hi friends, this is Nicole Topete, Digital Marketing Coordinator for Vineyard Worship. We would love to see you in Houston for our 2024 Sound Lab. Sound Lab is for beginner to advanced sound techs, worship leaders, and musicians of all ages who want to take their church's sound to the next level. We will have hands-on training from the industry's kindest and most talented techs. Our gathering will be fast-paced and include times of worship and ministry throughout. We aim to empower and encourage all sound and media techs serving the church. Our next Sound Lab will be January 18th through 20th at the Pearland Vineyard in Houston, Texas. Visit vineyardworship.com/Sound Lab for more information and to register. Can't wait to see you there.
Ferment. Yo, what's up, Mike O'Brien?
Hey, what's happening, Adam?
Hey, man, we're back in my office. We're podcasting again, and what are we calling this episode?
The working title is Lessons Learned and Trends in Worship Ministry.
And I love that. And the reason that we can talk about trends and lessons learned is that you and I spend time on the road.
Yeah, I think we're certainly speaking the trends and lessons learned from a vineyard context. Lots of vineyard churches, evangelical churches, Western certainly. And then the thought is, some of the most curious questions I get as a worship trainer consultant that spends a lot of time in other streams of the church. People are really curious about that.
Yeah.
They'll talk to me for hours about, what are you learning out there? What are you seeing? So I love sharing that and sharing the gifts of the whole church. And I know you and our national director, Jay Pathick, you guys just recently went and saw some things, on the West Coast and like in person. It's one thing to see things online and go, oh, I saw Bethel or Hillsong or, whatever. Online, you learn. But when you're actually in the room and you go to some of these churches, especially the small and the medium-sized churches where I do a lot of my serving, you see things, and it just blows my mind. I'm in the airports just writing things down like, oh my gosh, this is happening everywhere. Or what I just saw last night is happening nowhere. It's
right.
So cool.
Yeah.
So,
that's, so we're going to speak from our vineyard perspective, and you're going to speak even maybe in some ways from your experience of being taken outside of the vineyard too. So
absolutely.
you really have one foot in the vineyard and one foot in this reformed liturgical high praise.
So even over the course of a day, and I've got to share this, I've been able to share this with nobody because nobody else would get it because it's such a worship specific thing.
Yeah.
I go to an Anglican church in my town in the morning, Sunday morning to lead. And it's a high Anglican church. So it's lots of smells and bells, but they have, modern worship in a portion of it.
Yeah.
So I'm in the lobby of this high Anglican church. All the priests are kind of getting their robes together to do the procession in. Yeah. And there's always some middle school kid that holds the cross that comes in. The early service had just gotten out, and the early service is more than 50% people of color, because it's like the Rwandans and the African Anglicans that come to worship.
Right.
And then they go to black church afterwards. It's just hilarious.
No way.
So anyway, I see this young black woman, maybe 16 years old, and she's got there's a heavy metal band called Ghost that in their logo, they're kind of like a theatrical satanic band. It's like it's super nuanced, but there's inverted crosses on her tote bag.
Oh gosh, I'm crying.
And she's like working with the youth there. So I mean, she's in the church, and so I'm looking at that, and I'm looking at these priests, and we go in and we do the holy service and communion, and she's just part of the church.
That's right.
Right? So in that same day, 5 hours later, I'm at a vineyard church leading worship.
Yes.
And at the end of church, I noticed that the kids in this, it's a pop-up church, are cleaning up communion. And as they're cleaning up the communion, they're pounding the host bread.
Yes.
As they're cleaning it, they're just eating the rest of it.
Yes, that's right.
So the most like religious, all these things are coming together, and it's like, Lord, what are you doing on
And that's
this
just
earth?
a normal day on a Sunday for Mike O'Brien. Like you just got one foot in each of these worlds.
Yeah, and both churches we might sing "How Great Is Our God" or
that's right.
"King of Kings" or something, but it's just so fascinating how the Lord is working in all these places, and all the assumptions that we make about that little Lutheran church on the corner. There are things going on in there that are really sweet and profound and good and strange.
Yes.
And your little church is sweet and profound and strange.
That's right.
And just, it's really sweet. So
I love that. I just love that image of a 16-year-old African-American girl from Atlanta at a high Anglican church wearing a super metal shirt with inverted crosses. Yes, Lord. Yes, Lord. So you might be listening to this podcast, you might be wondering, well, why are you guys even talking about this? I think what Mike and I are trying to get to here is, for this discussion in the next 30 or 40 minutes, a lot of us are doing worship, at our church, and this is mostly Vineyard context. You're probably a Vineyard worship leader, but you do the daily grind at your church. You do the weekly thing. It's Sunday after Sunday. You have your team, you have your staff meeting, and not in a bad way, but in a very natural way. I'm going to use the word blinders because I don't have any other. It's not even, again, not bad.
Yeah.
But your experience of what is happening in the church, or your awareness of maybe even what's happening at your church, just becomes very singular because you sit in it all the time, right? Yep. And so we wanted to talk about some things that we've just seen on the road in the last year, and it might really encourage you about your church. It might encourage you in the sense of, like, number one, you're not alone, you're not doing everything wrong, you're thoroughly in step with other churches. Or on the other side, sometimes we intuit the next thing that the Spirit wants us to do or be, and we just don't have the courage because we think, am I just making this up? And so maybe we're going to talk about some trends, and it might just give you the courage to lean in with some things that are happening and to go with it. Or you might be realizing, oh, that's a trend I don't want to lean into, or whatever. So these are just some things, and I think it'll just help us have a bit more vision for what's happening in the worship space that includes the wider body, not just where we're at. So I think that's why we want to have this little conversation. Yeah. Mike, I'm just going to flip it to you. Hit me with a couple things. You've traveled a ton. How many churches have you been to in the last couple years?
I was in one church for 20 years as a worship pastor. In the past 8 years, it's probably a 200 or 300 number. I haven't specifically kept count, but it's varied. And a good portion of those, I don't know, I would say up almost 50% are probably Vineyard churches. So the main family of churches that this podcast reaches, although we've got lots of folks that listen to this, so this will be valuable. But I was thinking in the Vineyard world, some Vineyard-specific things and trends. I noticed in our summer gathering of our pastors, where our pastors gather, there was a room full of worship leaders. They booked us a room that held...
and Mike's talking about the national conference.
The national conference for the Vineyard in the summer. There's a room we had of 90 people with the accordion wall, which we blew out. And then, we were spilling out... Hey, if you're interested in worship or your worship leader, join in this room. And that room was packed beyond understanding. I mean, there was...
People were sitting in the floor.
Yeah, in the hallway, people, there were like 6 heads in the door, like peeking in. So the hunger is there. And half the room, there's this regeneration that's happening in the Vineyard. It happens all the time. The generations, there's just a new crop of people constantly. Yeah. Whether that's good or bad, I don't know, but it's constant, right? People curious, what do you guys do what you do? What's that thing I just saw on the stage? I don't see that anywhere. What is that? What is happening here? It's a huge curiosity. So in that room, the room's packed, people wanting to know vision, where are you guys going, what's happening? And you explained that very well. But then just a few hours later, we're at the bar, right?
Oh yeah, our worship leader hangout.
Yeah.
Which was insane. It was literally insane. It encouraged me so much. Melissa and I had planned that. We were like, well, we should get a space, a third space, not on the campus of the conference. Let's go someplace. Let's find some place where people can have something to eat and, drink a beer or two and be together. And, anyway, so I went and found this little spot, and I talked to the owner, Lincoln, and he's like, well, how many people do you think will come? And I'm like, I don't know, 80? He's like, oh, that'll be amazing. You know, it's a Tuesday night. And I'm like, do I need to give you any money, Lincoln? He's like, no way. If 80 people are coming, I'm like, are you sure you don't want me to like give you a deposit? And he's like, no way. Well, then I look up and there's 150 or 200. I don't know how many people were in that courtyard, but it was insane. And my takeaway was kind of like similar to yours from our little gathering earlier that morning, the hunger, but then also the friendship vibes. So there's just something happening in our Vineyard world. And, you know, I think if you were to put the hunger thing in the mix and the friendship vibe in the mix, along with like what you were saying a moment ago with the new faces, I think if you mix all that up together, what you get is renewal. Like there's a renewal there, you know, and if you're listening to this and you're like, well, I feel a little bit alone or I feel disconnected, or is there anyone else in the Vineyard who's like me? Is there anyone else who's facing the same things as I am? I just want you to know, yes. So many, so many. Yep. And there is a place for you, and there's like a renewal from the Lord happening in our midst. And I came away from that moment, I was like humming.
Yeah. Yeah, there's no lack of like, and this, if you're in the Vineyard, I want you to understand, like, this is not common. Like for any denomination in the world, for their music people to get together and have the hang and the richness that we have naturally in the Vineyard, it is a super rare thing. Yeah. It does not happen like this in other places. It's like our native language is to be together, and it's a natural gathering, and it's so good. I would say the other thing I learned at the conference was this, 20 years ago, we were having discussions about gender in the Vineyard and making more space for women to lead, teach, and preach. That is no longer, we don't even think about, like, that just happens naturally.
Oh yeah, the girls are everywhere.
Everywhere. Yeah. Like, it's not, I mean, you do have to intentionally think about it every once in a while, but it's just such a beautiful, natural thing. And I would say in the discussion about race and diversity, which we've been having heavily for 10 years. Yeah. Thank you, Gino. Thank you, Rich. Thank you, Tina and Josh Williams, Kevin Fisher. So many that have paved the pathway for us. It's starting to feel like more institutionally actualized in our gatherings.
It's not aspirational anymore.
Yeah, and this is coming from, the whitest dude in the world. Tim Brown led worship at the conference. Everybody was like, "Hey, great job leading last night." I'm like, "I did not lead. It was another bald white guy." So there's a few bald white guys on the stage, but it's so beautiful that it's starting to feel more actualized. I don't know if that's the right word, but
I think it is
in our gatherings, and I love it. And once again, people, we are so farther ahead than a lot of our contemporaries in, not that it's a competition, but I'm so thankful that I have the language and the understanding for this conversation. And it was really beautiful this summer.
Just one note on that. I've noticed that in our Vineyard gatherings lately, we've worked hard on including Spanish for years.
Yeah.
And we've sometimes succeeded and sometimes we've straight up failed, right? Mm-hmm. So take all the ownership there.
Hard,
yeah. But I have noticed at this last national conference, and then there was another Vineyard moment that I was in not long ago, and there was a lot of Spanish in it. And this is just a me perspective. But I've noticed that I've just become completely comfortable singing Spanish at any moment, right?
Yeah, no problem.
Like, I don't even know these songs.
Yep.
Like, there was a couple songs I didn't know, or let me put it this way. I knew the song, but I didn't know the Spanish, the translation.
Yeah.
I had never sung it. And it wasn't even a thing. I wasn't even trying to learn it. And that and I'm not a Spanish speaker, by the way. My Spanish is super remedial. But I left that gathering and I was like, oh, this is becoming a part of our muscle memory.
Praise the Lord.
It's not a thing. It doesn't take my brain capacity in a way that diminishes worship or causes me to think in a different way. It's just like, oh yeah,
Yeah, 10 years ago, I remember having discussions about diversity and race in worship and kingdom worship, like this vineyard thing that we do, are there any pictures of churches with people of color that are leading worship in an aspirational way, and in a Revelation picture way, every tribe and tongue, and the list of people that were doing it and pulling it off was rather short. You'd say, hey, Kevin Fisher, Miami Vineyard, they're doing an amazing job, right? And then you'd kind of run out of other, and now on a Sunday, I can see a bunch of live streams with a lot of expressions that are beautiful and much more diverse than it was before. So certainly have a long way to go, right? The journey in that is, we are in it for the long haul, but so encouraged by that.
Anything else from the national conference or the last couple of vineyard spaces you've been in, Mike?
In the Essentials world, so we started this Vineyard Worship Essentials training in the summer, had about 80 students in the summer, and we just finished up our fall session with about 40 students.
Yeah,
Man, people are hungry to get the DNA, to figure out what's this thing that we do, our expression that's unique. We're so thankful that we've got these courses now to walk people through it. So that's been really encouraging. So many young people just saying, hey, I'm here for this.
Right.
And it's kids of the pastors and the leaders and the missionaries of our movement that are now getting 18, 19, 20. This is great. It's like, dude, this is awesome.
Right.
The fruit of so many years. Everything's not lost.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the media angle, right? That's the Twitter angle. But everything's not lost. There's a lot of people that just love the Lord. They're not full of cynicism and hatred. They've got a much better, healthier, self-actualized, healthy understanding of things that even our generations had. So I'm stoked with
Amen.
that. I see it in the vineyard everywhere.
I think one of my takeaways from watching the summer session of Vineyard Worship Essentials and then the fall cohort was, I think you used this word already, but people they have an appetite to just like have somebody go, hey, this is what it means to be a vineyard worship leader. Like, these are our vineyard values. These are our vineyard thoughts about things. And we actually have space in the vineyard for some of these different worlds to collide in unique ways. I've had many, many people write to me about Jared Boyd's session from Vineyard Worship Essentials.
Sacraments and...
Yeah, people get rocked in that session.
Yeah.
And they're realizing, there's a space for this in our vineyard. It doesn't make you less vineyard.
Yeah.
Right? There's a space for this. Like, we can take communion really seriously, and we can make space for the bread and the wine and the cup and the family and the eating and the drinking, and it doesn't make you less vineyard. It's deeper vineyard, and that's one of those sessions that's popped through for a lot of people.
Yeah,
but people are very hungry to just be like, man, will you just tell me all the stuff?
Yeah, and there's some vineyard churches that the work of the Spirit and power evangelism and a lot of things that are, they haven't felt that or sensed that in a while. The hunger of God, the willingness to take a worship set and take a left turn or a right turn,
right.
The courage that it takes to do that, that's been an encouragement as well for the students, is to say, I need to take some risk. I need to really, invite the Spirit back into this Sunday morning, what sometimes just feels like a grid that we've sat in too long, and to kind of break that open and say, Lord, will you lead us? Let your kingdom come. We prayed it. Here it comes.
Yeah.
And be ready for that. So,
all right, Mike. So what else have you noticed outside the vineyard world? You've traveled. You're on the road. What are you seeing around?
Yeah, just like, I think things like the administration of what's going on in worship, planning center, song select, all the tools are kind of becoming more popular. The monopolies are becoming even more monopolized. There are still some churches that are getting away with scheduling and song administration in very like non-formal ways still.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. I mean, they're not signing up for any of the apps. They just, they're still printing up stuff and people are putting it on their felt boards at home,
Yeah.
which is cool. I mean, so you're not the only one if you're in that space, and people are just getting things done within their communities with those systems. I would say this interesting thing about like how much control a senior pastor has over a worship leader, sets, songs, who's in the team. It seems to be looser than ever.
And this is in the vineyard and outside the vineyard?
Everywhere. Yeah.
Everywhere.
Like, that the pastor is no longer single-handedly able to have their way with the team because there's just not as much of a tolerance for it.
So is what I'm hearing there, it's like collaboration?
Maybe. I mean, ideally, it moves towards collaboration, but also it moves towards just hands off. Like, if you're going to take care of the music, I'm just going to leave you alone.
Okay.
So you do it, and your reward I will not drive you crazy, right?
Yeah.
And
see you on Sunday.
Yeah, like that's the payment. Like, even if I can't pay you, I'm just not going to micromanage you.
Yeah.
So I would imagine there's a lot of pastors that maybe are grinding their teeth saying, oh, I wish we'd do this or that, but they're just choosing not, there's probably some good and bad in that conversation, but that just seems to be the trend. There's less money for music ministry in general. The money's just going away.
Mike, talk to me on that note. Talk to me. What are you seeing at churches, even like mainline churches? Are they just doing part-time worship leaders, stipends, teams, like one person on staff who's just adminning, and then what is it?
It's a lot of bare minimum. Like, what's the bare minimum we need to do to have some music here on Sunday? So that might mean just like we're going to let a busy mom choose the songs in the set, and it might just be a lot of wash, rinse, and repeat, and not a lot of deep dive, and just a lot of the similar musicians. Smaller bands, cajon, singer, is very common. Even in a church with 150, like we just haven't had a drummer in 2 years, or we don't have good sound. Like we just have, like, dude, there's a lot of churches I go to, they just turn the soundboard on, and nobody's back there.
Yeah.
Like they just have like a setting and you just
set it and forget it.
You just get through it.
Yeah, it's like the George Foreman grill.
Yeah, and here's the thing. I run Sound Lab. I love sound. I think sound's amazing. I want to train 1 million sound people. But there's a lot of places where the kingdom of God is coming and church is getting done, and the things I hold near and dear aren't being held near and dear, and God's still moving in the place. So if you're in that place and you don't have the people, God can still move in a great way, and the church can even grow and be okay in that place. So seeing all sorts of things like that. A lot of consensus leadership. So like 3 or 4 people, high capacity leaders just overseeing a worship ministry. And if I ask them who's in charge, they don't have an answer.
And how's that working out?
In a lot of places, it's fine.
Yeah.
They just love each other. They're all in a small group and they all have kids, or, there's just, everybody's got a different gift and they bring it to the table, and it works for oftentimes years and years and years. Eventually it breaks because of something, but not always in a terrible way, not in a nefarious way, just in a way where the system can't contain it.
Yeah.
The leadership part of me would say, you got to find a leader and you got to do that if you want to grow. But a lot of places, their aspiration isn't growth and world domination. It's just, let's continue to show up and do a good job.
Yeah.
The contemplatives are winning back some of that space in church and in church growth. And I see that in a lot of places where it's like, oh, it was good today. What about the next sinner to come to the Lord Jesus Christ?
Yeah.
Post-COVID, a lot of that is just, I don't see as much of that, but I don't see everything. So
that's interesting.
Yeah.
It's interesting, your little note about consensus leadership. Mm-hmm. Some of that also just, I wonder, I'm not a sociologist, but I wonder how much of that is just generational as well. I mean, once you drop below the Gen X folks like you and I, And even below millennials, there's just so much more capacity to do things together.
Yeah.
That's just what they do.
Yeah. And I think whatever judgment you might have for or against that, you just have to measure it with the fruit. And there's really some sweet things. And I've had to just repent and say, man, there are some things happening here that 5 years ago I would have said, this is not kind. This is not good for your volunteers. But a lot of places are getting the work done.
Mike, talk to me about songs.
Yeah. So,
I mean, you're in all kinds of spaces.
Uh-huh. So here's what I learned about songs is when I go to a church, I say, hey, send me your PCO invite, Planning Center invite, your worshipteam.com invite, and let me see under the engine. What have you guys been singing? What have you been doing? So I go into a church, and instead of singing my songs, I wish I was a popular touring artist, but that's not my shtick. So my shtick is coming into your kingdom and figuring out how you guys have been getting things done, and then influencing it however I can. So I'm looking at song histories for lots of different churches. 5 years ago, almost every church would have had very similar songs. This is Amazing Grace would have been across the board. Living Hope would have been across the board. A lot of the, Goodness of God. I mean, who's not singing that, right? I know some of you are like, I'm not singing, I'm fighting the system.
Yeah.
So whereas now today, there is not as much of that immediately today. So a song like Tomlin's Holy God, which I think won a Dove, everybody's not clamoring to do that song necessarily. It seems to be more of what I've always wanted to see, which is church families have family songs, not necessarily songs written within their world, but they've got a song universe that's unique and is not as corporate. So in the small and medium-sized churches, which is good. So some churches I've noticed in the past few weeks, some churches have no songs about pain or struggle or what I would call funeral songs, right? Like there's nothing there, which is not great. Some songs are very Christocentric or have tons of Christ-centered songs. Some not so much. Some more emotional or emotive songs. It's interesting. A lot of places still are struggling with the fast, high-energy songs. And most churches still have that kind of first, what we would call a throwaway song that's just kind of fast in the beginning to pull everybody in. That's still a thing, and it's still hard to find that song.
Are churches doing the welcome after that song, Mike? Or are they doing it before and then just kind of it's a throwaway in the set?
Oftentimes, yeah, there's a welcome, or the idea is just that, hey, this is what's gonna pull people in. At Vineyard Community Church Augusta, I was there last week, and they installed a bell in their roof or in their ceiling of this, and they ring the bell. It's an old school bell when they want everybody to come in. I thought, well, that's genius.
Yeah, we just ring the bell. That's come on in, guys.
Pavlov's just get your buns in here to worship.
You ring the bell, and people's arms just go up. And they're just worshiping.
And they've even written about this in Christianity Today. The return of the classic songs. Classic as in like turn of the century, 90s. How Great Is Our God, Here I Am to Worship, 10,000 Reasons, Even Greater You Lord, I Don't Think Has Ever Died. I think all this stuff just continues. Those evergreens are evergreen.
Yeah, is it nostalgia?
Maybe. Maybe
or
it's
are
just
those
tried
songs
and true songs.
They're just better.
Tried and true songs, maybe better, simpler. The range, it's not as exhausting. The range of a lot of great songs, the newer songs, is just exhausting. It requires a lot of the singers, and you're just tired. Whereas a song like How Great Is Our God, like, man, it does, theologically, it does the work, and just kind of sing it in the room's going to know it and sing it. So that's been really interesting, and we'll probably see. And like the way the catalogs are being bought out now by the corporate entities, they're going to put money back into re-recording those classics because they want to recoup. Well,
the world already knows those songs.
Yesterday, I led worship here in Campbellsville at your church, and there's a 19-year-old kid with a Bethel hoodie on, and he came up to me and said, dude, I love that old song. And I sang 2 old songs yesterday. I sang one, There Is a Redeemer by Melody Green, 1978 copyright. And then I sang, at the end of the set, I sang I Love Your Presence, Darren and Jesse Clark, Vineyard song. That's 20 years old, maybe 15.
No, it's 20.
So I thought he was referencing There Is a Redeemer. He's like, man, I love that old stuff. But he's like, what was it? I love you. I love your presence.
That's right.
I was like, whoa, bro.
Yeah.
He's like, when I was a little boy, I remember that song.
That's right.
So just, depending on how old you are, what is old is new. What is new is old. It's a crazy world.
Well, on that note, at least in our Vineyard world, because Casey and I sometimes we pop in and look at CCLI rankings. We pop in and look at we can see what Vineyard churches are playing.
Yeah.
Right? And then we can also see on the mechanical label side of a song, not to get too granular here, but on that side of a song, we can also see what songs are just being played or streamed on YouTube and Spotify and Apple Music.
Yeah.
And here's what's interesting, Mike. Draw Me Close is dominating.
Wow.
For over 18 months now.
Wow.
It just started dominating, especially on YouTube. And if you go on YouTube, you will see so many new versions of that song. That song just is kind of everywhere right now.
Yeah.
There's like an Upper Room moment. There's a couple big churches in Florida that picked it up. And it's just kind of your point, like what was old is new again.
Yeah, I'm looking at the CCLI Top 100 here in November 2023, and it's telling me how great is our God's making a comeback.
Yeah.
It's coming back, and those evergreens are there, It's just so interesting.
That is it. Oh, Mike, talk to me about pastoral leadership. And here's what I'm actually thinking here for a second. I know in our Vineyard world, a lot of pastors are retiring, changing. In the next 5 years in the Vineyard, there's something like another 150 or 70 pastors who are going to retire or need to retire, And so the Vineyard is in this seismic change of going from boomer maybe to X leadership, but it might even jump over X. It might jump right into millennial and on the way down. What are you seeing out in the rest of the world? Like, are other churches transitioning leaders? Is that a struggle for them? Are they finding pastors? Are the pastors coming from within? Are they from without? What's happening out there?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't feel like. I mean, the truth is that on my social feeds, every day a Gen X pastor gets his wings, gets the key, gets the keys to the church, and the church is either paid off, and there's money in the bank, and the glue sticks are full in the bins.
Yeah, that's right.
And then, unfortunately, they're also getting, here's everything, $2 million in debt, and it's all over the map, and it's blowing up, the leaders are all tired and exhausted, and you're the new blood, good luck, so but it is happening all over the place. There's transitions are happening from boomer to X, or to your point, skipping generations. And it feels like the conversations are like, well, now that we've got the keys, what are we going to do in this post-Christian deconstruction, woke, unwoke, political climate? How do we frame church? What does church look like? Where does music fit in the church? We're 30 years, 40 years, and 50 years. The Vineyard will be 50 years old. We've been doing cool church for a hot minute. My 12-year-old son is not impressed by any sort of drums on stage, or there's no context of like, oh, that used to be old and now this sounds cool and new. I mean, this is old to them.
Those things don't make you radical
anymore.
Or they're not risk taking. They're not.
Yeah.
There's no social or spiritual capital to be won there.
So music isn't the catalyst of the thing that makes it new and fresh anymore.
Right.
Which is kind of sad. It's like, oh man, we is our moment over? Well, yeah, probably. And maybe that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it was always a deeper thing anyway than the songs and the music. But as an artist, as a creative, it was a nice time to live through, you know, and be able to play a little bit. But the day has changed a bit more. And I don't know what the future is going to hold in creative musical worship ministry, but I know that a lot of those tropes are just tired.
Yeah.
You know, the modern church, moving light thing. I mean, the challenge was always, can we be as good as the non-Christians? Can we make it high enough quality? And I think the answer is, yeah, we've already done. In some ways, we've overshot the runway.
Right now, there's a pastor in Las Vegas trying to book the Sphere. you know, it's just like he's planning Easter 24 at the Sphere.
Oh yeah, it's got who's got the Sphere for Easter?
I don't
morning?
know, but someone's going to. Maybe it's you too. Maybe they just Bono comes back and he leads communion at the end of their set. I don't know, but yeah, I hear your point. But to go back to the pastoral transitions and Xers starting to have leadership.
Yeah.
You know, one of the things that's always been true in our vineyard world is the path or the pipeline to being a pastor is often from the worship world.
Sure.
And I would just want to say to many of our worship leaders who are leading right now, you know, if the Lord is talking to you about that, you should listen.
Yeah.
And you should begin to tell someone, you know, because there's a very good chance that maybe the end of your career is not playing a guitar, but it may be leading the church where you're at or leading another vineyard church.
And there's all kinds of different people saying yes to this role.
Yeah.
Men and women. You know, our friend Justin Law just
shout out Justin
said yes to
Amen.
pastor. You know, he's a
Amen.
He's a single dude, late 40s. I mean, like
led worship forever.
Yeah. He's very like punk rock aesthetic.
Yes.
Has a rock band that plays in Minneapolis.
I think Justin has 5 rock bands. The man is always putting out a new record.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Couples planning churches together or just saying yes to these existing churches. So yeah, there's definitely, for a lot of us out there, worship leaders, creatives, that if what I told you before is true, that the rock and roll dream of church is maybe dead, and maybe that we're not going to be able to live all the best dreams, like it's just kind of tired in the church, then maybe that is your call to say, well, what does it mean to be a creative leader that is pastoring and shepherding people beyond the music, beyond the harmonies and rhythms, which are fun, but man, there is a rich world out there that's beyond just the worship stage. That's for sure.
And we're going to need it in the vineyard. Hey, Mike, can I throw 2 things on this fire?
Sure.
Number one, this is something that Melissa and I have just noticed for a while in the vineyard space. There are fewer guy worship leaders. You know, I mean, girl power is real right now. One of the things we've noticed even at our events is there are fewer guys at the events, and there are way more women at our events. Yeah. Which there's a part of that. It's really super great. Like all of that work that we did in the early 2000s about making room in leadership in all areas of the vineyard for women of every stripe. It's clearly taken hold.
Yep.
But I'm also noticing this with some friends who are outside the vineyard in other just church contexts.
Yep.
When it comes to worship, there are fewer guys. I have one little theory, and it may or may not be a part of this at all, but one of the things I've noticed, and you said this earlier, there's just fewer worship leaders who are like full-time or like career worship leaders, you know? And I've wondered if in a world where there's fewer full-time worship leaders, if the guys just had to go get a big job to support their family.
Sure.
You know, and I don't know. And so all of a sudden, at our church, maybe the stay-at-home mom with 2 kids, she has some space in her life, and so she's leading now in a way that maybe the guys can't or aren't. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, there's the socioeconomic issue, and then what is classic nuclear family, what is like postmodern world where we're in. So yeah, I think that the finances of what's going on with churches probably plays a role in that. I will say that, if we were to have an all male worship team, it's not noteworthy. I think we still can and should be looking to having all female speakers or worship teams and not blinking, right? I still feel like we've got a ways to go before that.
We need more female drummers and bass players.
Dude, come on. Yeah. And text, like, just keep saying yes and keep intentionally recruiting and across the board. I think that both age and gender, I think, is really important. So I love that there's a lot of females leading, but yeah, I think that wherever you're at in your church, it might be the opposite, right? It might be girls club, guys club. We're always saying, Lord, will you send us, every tribe, tongue, and nation, right? That this would look like your kingdom, and certainly look like our zip code. So in that space, let's train up. If that's the problem that you're seeing in your space, we need to train up the dudes to fill those roles,
All right, one more thing. You talked about this a moment at the very beginning of this podcast. You hinted at that Jay and I taking a little trip to California. And one of the things that Jay and I did is we dropped in on this little pastors gathering one morning called Sea Rock. It's kind of the cool kids club. So ultra cool pastors from around the country, John Mark Comer and Todd Proctor and Glenn Packiam from Rock Harbor. This was out in Orange County. But then there's pastors from all over, right? And it was a really cool gathering. But a couple things that I took away from that, because so much of the church was sort of represented in that room, or there was a wider distribution. It wasn't a denominational meeting.
Sure.
But my takeaways were, number one, the insane love that the wider church has for the Vineyard. I mean, Jay and I were mobbed. And we were mobbed not because Jay and I are cool or because we're a household name, but we were mobbed because all these men and women who are leading churches are like, we love the Vineyard.
Wow.
They were like, can you talk to us about, naturally supernatural Holy Spirit ministry and things that are just normal?
Sure.
Or things we don't even think about. Other churches are so moved by and they're pursuing them. They're trying to figure that out. And then, so that was like, that was just encouraging, as a person who's deeply committed to the Vineyard to go, we still have a gift to give to the church.
Yeah.
Like big time.
Absolutely.
So that was cool. The other thing that rocked me about this gathering was, and we've had some of this impulse in the Vineyard for a while as well, but this marriage between the contemplative and the charismatic. And in this, if you go on the little Sea Rock website, they have this list of values, and right at the very top, it's charismatic and contemplative.
Yeah. It's
the marriage of this. So whatever the future of the church is, it's the marriage of charismatic and contemplative.
Yeah.
Like in every space of the church. One of the things that I was noticing from the speakers and from the people that I was talking to in between meetings was it wasn't just like, oh, we'll set up a charismatic moment and we'll set up a contemplative moment. But there's also this, and there's some of that, right? But there was this intuition that these things can be held in the same meeting. That they're like, maybe we should, on a Sunday morning, there should be some moment that's slightly more contemplative. And at the same time, let's make room for the charismatic expression of the gifts of the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
That these things, they're not opposite. They're the same. And we've had some of that intuition in the Vineyard for a while.
Yeah.
But it was very cool to get an outside perspective, and it's every branch of the church, because there were Methodists there.
Yeah.
There were like cool kid, non-denominational scene churches. There were The Anglicans were there.
Yeah.
I mean, it was everybody. And the thing that everybody was sort of centering around was, man, how can we lean into a vineyard version of the charismatic?
Yeah.
And then how can we hold on to the deep historic contemplative practices of the wider church? And let's put them together.
Yeah.
And that's a thing.
Yeah, I think that it seems like the future of the church is that we blur these lines and judgments more. You know, the people that are going to show up to your church and say yes to your church in 2024, 2025, if they're there, they're there. Like they're open to spirituality and growth in that area, and they're gonna have a much more varied history than they did 20 years ago. Whereas a Baptist kid was a Baptist kid, right?
Right.
Or a Methodist kid was a Methodist kid. You know, so people are going to be open to many other things. And I would just say that the spirituality people, like people that are hungry for spirituality and finding it outside of Jesus, like making space with silence, contemplative exercises that lead people to Jesus, that leads you to the truth. Because if we believe that Jesus is the truth, he is the way, and his kingdom is here, and that his spirit is here, and that he's moving, and that he's the creator of the universe, then in silence, he wins. Like if people are seeking,
it's another on-ramp.
If people are seeking, truly seeking, he wins in that silence. We don't always have to flood the air with propaganda, with our church tricks and tips and, you know, spelling it out clearly. Jesus Christ is, I mean, that's helpful. We need to do that with our language and words. But what if silence? What if mystery? What if art? What if the mystics have something to say and we can include some of those pauses within our gatherings?
Yeah, I came home from this gathering and I thought this on my plane ride home. I thought, you know, in the way that in the last 30 years, the Vineyard helped make everybody at least a little bit charismatic. Every stream is charismatic now. Sure. Like the Baptists are charismatic, at least in the way they worship.
Sure.
You know, Elevation is a Baptist church
Sure. Yeah.
planting thing, right?
Yep.
They're charismatic. They're Pentecostals.
Yeah.
You know, Passion City, they're Baptists. Yeah. But the truth is they've become a little bit charismatic.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's certainly true for the Vineyard and then other spaces as well.
Yeah.
But the whole world has just, in the last like 30 years, has really become so much more open to the present, tangible movement and awareness of God's presence and spirit, right?
Yes.
And I came home from this meeting going, oh, the next 30 years, everyone's going to be a little bit contemplative. Mm-hmm. Everyone. And I think it's going to infiltrate the Baptists. Mm. It's going to infiltrate everyone.
Yeah.
The Methodists, everybody who was sort of, you know, maybe their Sunday morning expression was a couple songs and a Romans Road sermon. I think that day is over.
Yeah.
I think that day is over, and it's going to become increasingly contemplative, charismatic, many, many ways to situate our hearts and minds to be open and aware to God's Spirit.
Yeah.
And I thought, you know, not that that's even a new thought for us in the Vineyard, but I just thought, oh, it's going to go deeper.
Yeah, even the stiffest Presbyterian mainline churches that I visit, where they're all just staring at me while I'm singing, they will sing, "I love you, Lord."
Yeah.
And your mercy never fails me. Like just that phrase, "I love you, Lord," from goodness of God, that is exceedingly intimate to sing that. And I had forgotten that until I introduced that song in a Presbyterian space, that the organizers were like, yeah, sure, we can add that song. They'll even say you can add Holy Spirit. Holy Spirit, you are welcome here. But when the church sings it, it is very new to them to say something like that to Jesus in worship, but they're willing to do it almost across the board. There's no prohibition of that. So people are open to the Spirit in that place. So the gifts of the Vineyard are for the church, and I would say the other streams of the church have gifts for us of stability, of responsive reading, of scripture reading. None of those things are going to stop the power evangelism train.
Right.
In fact, they're going to fuel it and help it. So I'm just constantly laying down my judgments of other places and streams and struggles and saying, it's not my way or the highway, and continue to teach us. Open our eyes to what the Lord is doing in our periphery. Because when we worship forever in the kingdom come and the new heaven and the new earth, in our periphery will be people that did not worship like us on this earth.
Maybe didn't sing with the guitar. Just never had the guitar.
Yeah. So can we get there sooner? Can we see a glimpse of it now? Yeah. There's gifts everywhere for us.
Mike, dude, that's a pretty good list.
Yeah, man.
Hey, thanks for having this conversation.
Thanks so much.
All right, my dude. Everybody, have a good day wherever you're at. Peace.
Take care.
Hey everyone, Casey Corum here, producer of the podcast. Thanks for listening. As always, if you've been enjoying the podcast, here's a few ways you can help us. First of all, leave us a review on the podcast platform of your choice. This helps more people find us. Also, connect with us on social media, Instagram at the Ferment Podcast and Twitter at FermentCast. All right, everyone, thanks for listening. See you next week. Peace.